Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello and a warm welcome to Reflections from Torch Trust, the programme that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm your host, Marilyn Baker, and today we're going to hear the fascinating story of author and inspirational speaker Emily Owen. Long-term listeners of Reflections may remember her from an interview from over a decade ago when she first shared her powerful journey of adapting to life with deafness. Her story is one that continues to inspire, and this is a brand new conversation offering fresh insights and reflection on how her life and faith have evolved. Emily Owen is a Christian author and speaker whose writing explores faith, resilience, and embracing life with disability. As a teenager, with a deep love for music and a bright future ahead, Emily was diagnosed with neurofibromatosis type 2. It's known as NF2A. It's a rare condition that leads to progressive hearing loss and other health challenges. Her journey of adapting to a new life without sound has been one of profound change, faith, and discovery. In her book, Still Emily, which I absolutely love, she really gets you to feel in her shoes, as it were. She shares her personal story with honesty, warmth, and a deep sense of hope. She has also written several devotional books that inspire readers to find joy and trust in God through life's uncertainties. Here she is in conversation with producer Lynn Davies.
For those who are not familiar with your story, can you share your story with NF2?
So my story with NF2 began before I'd even heard of NF2. So if people haven't heard of NF2, I understand that. But basically, NF2 is a condition where you grow tumours on nerves anywhere in the body. And my NF2 was diagnosed when there were some tumours on my auditory nerves, and they grew so big that they were squashing my brainstem, and my balance was very bad, and I had headaches. And so they diagnosed NF2. They removed the tumours, and that left me deaf. So I wasn't born deaf, but I am now deaf.
You talk a lot about being a music lover. How has your love for music evolved after you became deaf?
It's interesting. Before I lost my hearing at the age of 21, music was a huge part of my life. I played various instruments in bands and orchestras and worship groups at church. And, music was literally the backing track of my life. Then obviously overnight in surgery, that disappeared. But I'm always thankful that I have quite a good music memory. That doesn't mean I don't wish I could hear music again. I would love to hear music again. But I do have a good music memory, so I can still play things to myself in my head. I still sing in the shower. So my relationship with music has probably evolved in as much as so now if I'm in church and a worship song comes up and I have never heard it before, I can see the words on the screen, but I can't hear the music. So what I tend to do is actually make up my own tune to that song. So I still can sing it in my head. Don't worry, I don't sing it out loud, but I can sing it in my head. And so that is an evolving of my relationship with music.
I have never seen, but I don't consider myself blind in my head. How do you consider yourself? Are you deaf in your own world?
It's really interesting. I feel as though I'm a hearing person who can't hear, if that makes sense. I still feel like a hearing person, but my ears don't work. So, yeah, the inner me feels more hearing than deaf, I think. In terms of voices, I don't know if I can remember people's voices or not. One thing I do remember from hearing is accents. So somebody speaks with a, for example, Scottish or Welsh accent, or even English as a second language, I can see on their lips that they have a different accent.
So one thing that really also struck me when I read your book was your very unshakable faith. Did you ever wrestle with God through your journey? And because you do talk about this, why me and why not me?
Yeah, I think in terms of have I ever wrestled with God, the short answer would be yes. Because when things are difficult in life, I don't believe that God says, don't question me, don't talk to me, back away, just carry on as though everything's fine. I think he wants us to bring our struggles to him and to be honest about them. And I remember one particular time when I was going for surgery, because I have a lot of surgeries, and I kind of told God, I don't want to do this anymore. I've had far too many surgeries than anyone my age should have had, actually, than anyone should have had. And I don't want to do it anymore. So I told him the plan. I said, I'll go into the anaesthetic room, I'll have the anaesthetic, but I don't want to wake up after it. And I sort of thought God would go, okay, yeah, we won't wake you up. But God said, no, you will wake up. And so I remember saying to him in kind of conversation, saying, but how am I going to do this life that I don't want, that I didn't choose? And he said these two words to me that really, really stuck with me. He said, you need to let go. And I realized he was right, because I was trying to live holding on to everything I used to be, rather than living here I am now and looking ahead. So I gradually did begin to let go, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's always easy. But when I let go, it's handing things over to God. So if I have a frustration about what I can't do anymore, I do take that and I acknowledge it, but I also give it to God, and He helps me keep going.
Has your understanding of prayer and worship changed after you became deaf? And do you connect to God any differently now than what you used to do before?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Because actually, thinking about it, I think my relationship with worship has changed. Because I was before in worship, say a worship service at church, I would be able to hear everyone worshipping with me, and that was part of my worshipping. Whereas now I can't. So actually, when I worship, even communally, you know, I'm focused more on the words or more on God, and so I find that my worship has changed. I would say if I'm, for example, walking in the park, worshiping God on my own, my worship is pretty much the same as it is when I'm in a group, because I don't have that sense of connection because I can't hear them.
Do you see, though, your disability and your deafness like something that has changed you as a person in a lot of ways? Or is it sort of like a continuation of your journey? Like you just see it as one stop on your journey, even though I can imagine it's a pretty significant one.
I'm trying to think, well, my memoir is actually called Still Emily. And we took a long time to settle on that title. I wasn't sure, but in the end, my publisher said, Still Emily would be good, because ultimately, all that you've been through, you are still Emily. So I would say, despite everything that's happened, essentially, I'm still me. And I have actually found it really, really important in my journey of losses and changes and disappointments. I found it really important to hold on to my identity, that my identity is in God. It's not in all the other things that I can and can't do. So I would say essentially it's the same, but obviously life literally changes when you have a life-changing experience like I've had.
Has it changed how you're being received in Christian communities? You being approached in a different way or treated in a different ways than you were before?
I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to say it hasn't really changed. I honestly can say that. I'm just, at every church I go into, I am welcomed. I am seen for who I am. And I feel really fortunate in that. Having said that, I can talk. And that makes a big difference in the deaf world, I would say, because people who are born deaf aren't able to verbally talk. So there's not that immediate connection. So I can walk into a church and I can say, I'm deaf. And there's that immediate connection. So I haven't, as I say, I haven't really been perceived differently, I would say, in churches. I've actually found real acceptance of my disability.
Now let's return to part 2 of Emily's interview.
Do you think that becoming disabled or becoming deaf was something that sparked your writing?
I think because of becoming disabled, I think that's probably it led into my writing. Yes. But when I began writing, I was actually very keen not to write about myself, not to write about my experiences. So my first books are very much about the Bible. The only thing of me is my name on the cover. And so, as I say, I didn't want disability to be a part of it, but gradually God led me to sort of include my experiences of disability in my writing.
So when Still Emily came out, what was the reaction from readers, and were there any reactions that surprised you?
In the main, the reaction was positive. People who read the book are positive about it. And something that's encouraging is that although it's about hearing loss and my experiences of life, a lot of those things resonate in other people's experiences as well, even if their experiences are different. So that's encouraging. One person said, which was both surprising and encouraging actually, they said, this is on Amazon. And so I don't know who it was that said it, but they put, I've read this book, Still Emily. It's a good book, but it's got God in it. So they didn't realise, obviously, that I'm a Christian. But the thing that was really encouraging was that they still read the book, even though they realised that there was going to be themes of God and Christianity throughout it, they still read. And I found that really encouraging. But I also found it quite thought-provoking because they said it's a good book, but it's got God in it. And I would say it's only a book at all because it's got God in it. It's actually a book that I was never going to write. So ever since I was diagnosed as a teenager, 17 years old, and I went through quite difficult surgeries at the beginning, and I had time in intensive care, and I was quite ill. It took me a long time to recover. But when I had recovered and began to enter life again, people suggested that I write my story. And I said, nope, never happening. And then years later, finally, God said, I think it's going to happen now. And I wrote it.
Have you found any other unexpected sources of connecting with God since becoming disabled?
In a sense, actually, silence, because when I could hear, there's a lot of sound bombarding all the time. But now I'm almost, well, literally forced into this silence. And I would say one way that I've particularly kind of connected with him and grown much closer to him is, as you've already talked about, with hearing loss and deafness. It's difficult in a social situation because you can't hear what's being said. And if I'm in a social situation, lots of people in the room, everyone's chatting, and I don't know what's being said, it can be very easy to kind of almost shrivel up inside and to feel outside of it all. But I learned, and God taught me, that just because I can't connect with all those people around me in that moment, I can always connect with him. So when I'm feeling perhaps a bit isolated within a crowd, I talk to God and I bring him in. And that has really strengthened my relationship with him.
So you talk in your book about embracing a new normal. What does that look like for you today?
I think when I wrote the book, I must have been very optimistic to suggest that I could be normal because I'm not convinced I'm the most normal person out there. But yeah, my normal is probably I've learned to take things kind of day by day or week by week rather than trying to plan too far ahead. I am a planner. I do like a plan, and I've had to learn to let go of some of that because quite frequently my health intervenes and I might have said, oh yes, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And my health says, oh no, not today, you're not. Today, you're not going to be feeling very well at all. So I've had to learn to work with my health condition rather against it.
If you could go back to the young Emily who was just beginning this long journey, what advice would you give her?
Again, I like the assumption that young Emily would have been so willing to listen to all the advice that she was giving. But what advice would I give her? I think I would say take a day at a time. Celebrate the seemingly small things, because I've learnt to do that. I have really learnt to realise that the things we think are small achievements aren't necessarily small at all. So, for example, if I've been in hospital paralysed, learning to walk, whereas previously I would have seen an achievement as, running laps of a track or doing a cross-country race. And I had to learn that it was just as much of an achievement to literally take 2 steps. And so I had to change my perspective on what was an achievement, what was doing well. I might actually add to young Emily that you will never get it right. Learn to live with not getting it right all the time.
Do you have any books or projects you're working on now that you're excited about?
Yes, I have a book coming out in October, which is a book that is on a theme that, as I've already indicated, is very important to me, about identity and who we are in Christ. Because I think very often we kind of look at ourselves, non-literally, but we look at our lives and we, as we've just said, we can see negatives and we can see that we're not perfect and we can begin to be very down on ourselves. But God looks at us, and I don't think he always sees us in the way that we see us. He sees us really positively. And so the book is about learning to see ourselves as God sees us and to really embrace that and believe it.
Romans chapter 8, verse 35, from the New Living Translation. Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or are persecuted, or hungry, or destitute, or in danger, or threatened with death? No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. And I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither our fears for today nor our worries about tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. No power in the sky above or in the earth below, indeed nothing in all creation, will ever be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus our Lord.
If you found Emily's interview fascinating and would like to hear more of her story, Still Emily, or if you'd like to read from her devotional books, they're available from Torch in audio, braille and giant print. Just contact Client Services using the details at the end of the programme and they'll be happy to help. You also heard a reading of Romans chapter 8, verses 35 to 39, from the NLT version taken from the audio version of Still Emily, read by Sheila Dunning. I'm sorry to say we're out of time for this week, but we'll be back next week with more stories and reflections for Palm Sunday. And don't forget, if you're blind or partially sighted and would like to learn more about any of the services provided by Torch, including the Hope for All project, signing up for the Lent course, our Torch Together holidays, and our accessible books and resources, or our other groups, our client services team would be very happy to speak to you. The number to call for information and for song requests as well is 01858 438 260. That's 01858 438 260, or you can email about all those things using info@torchtrust.org. You can also find us on social media. Just search for Torch Trust on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reflections, and so until next week, from me, Marilyn and everyone on the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.